Hey everybody, Mr. Wallowitz here. So this is something new that I'm going to be trying to do for as long as we are virtual, and perhaps even if we are back in the classroom, is using Screencastify to do PowerPoints instead of maybe not wasting a day, but putting a day aside for just a notes-taking session. Instead of doing that, this gives us a chance for you to view the notes on your own time at your own pace, so that this way we can kind of maybe move through the material a little bit quicker. We are going to try it out. This is the very first time I'm doing something like this. You will be responsible for viewing these Screencastify PowerPoint notes taking sessions, whatever they're going to be called. You are responsible for all of the material on here, taking notes if you would like to do that. Some information that does appear on these PowerPoints will appear on quizzes or tests. So, for example, the study of history. This is like our introductory lesson to history, our history class, like why we study it, what are we going to study, and so on. There are some terms to know. You will be responsible for this, knowing this stuff. There will be a quiz that will be announced at a later date about everything covered on this. So I think without further ado, we'll get started here. Um, so this is the study of history, the why we study history, why we learn about it. So what is history? History is simply the story of humanity's past. It is a way to systematically record and explain what people have thought, done, and said. And history deals in three different categories. They are either political, it is economic, or it is social. Analytical categories. These three terms will be seen throughout the school year. Every single article that we read, every single document that we view, um, everything falls into one of these three categories. You will see these terms throughout the school year. You will be required to identify which documents are fall into which category. So, political is anything pertaining to the government. So, any article that we read, any document that we view, if it is anything to do with politics, anything to do with government, anything like that, it is a political document, a political article. Economic, relating to agriculture, industry, and trade. Same thing. If whatever document or article we are reading, if it deals in any way with agriculture and the farming industry, industry itself and manufacturing, or trade between countries or between states, it is an economic. It falls into the economic category. And lastly, social is referring to everyday life and culture. Everything that people do falls into this category of in the social analytical category. So if it's somebody talking about their experience through something, experience through an event or something similar to that, any article or document, it will falls under the social analytical category. These three aspects of history are interrelated because a development in one phase usually affects the others. And so if there's a change in the way something that the government does, it could affect economic policy. It could affect how you may live your everyday life. A change in one can almost always affect another. So, what is history and why? How do we read history? Well, history, it's an effort to reconstruct the past. History helps us discover what people thought and did. Like, how can we find this out? Well, for a long time, and I think even still today, a very long time, people recorded their thoughts and their feelings in a journal or a diary that was preserved over many, many years. Um, Even those who aren't the quote unquote famous people in history still recorded their thoughts and feelings in a journal or diary of some sort, that are still found, that we are still finding and researching today. You all, I mean, hopefully, I mean, not hopefully, but like maybe you all still do the same thing. You may not be writing it in a diary or a physical journal or something like that, but through your social media, through Instagram, through Snapchat or TikTok or Twitter or whatever you're using, you are contributing to a reconstruction of the past. So your thoughts and ideas are being recorded and saved online forever. History helps us determine how people's beliefs and actions continue to influence human life. How do we know this to be true? Well, there's history, and especially in our country, a lot of what exists today in society is based on precedent and how things were done in the past, and how through tradition, through precedent, and trying to follow the lead that came before us, we still are constructing society today. And society is always changing, and it always should change to fit the needs of whoever is alive now. So historians try to reconstruct the past by posing questions to work towards their own answers. Well, why did this happen? How do we know this happened? How can we put things together? Historians will try to analyze as much information as possible from a lot of different points of view to try to reconstruct what happened before now. Perspective. Historical perspective helps us to understand factors that have helped to shape us as individuals, the society we live in, and the nature of other people's societies. It is the responsibility of the historian to examine all evidence, whether it is written or if it's nonverbal. Pieces of nonverbal evidence to help reconstruct the past could be clothing, artifacts, silverware, buildings, something that's not actually spoken or written down. But why does point of view matter? Well, point of view helps us to shape ideas from somebody else's perspective. How people might view the government could be from, you have your president, your mayors, your governors, or whoever, and the way that they dictate policy, or it could be from the people and how they participate and how they protest and how they do things to try to influence the government in their own way. So point of view kind of matters. Everybody in our classes have a different point of view. If I always like to say when we're in the classroom, the 30 people who are in this class have 30 different ways of viewing life because you all aren't growing up in the same body, in the same home, in the same anything. Everything is different. So the way that one person views reality and views the way that things are done now is different from somebody else. And it's important to get all 30 of us, our point of view, to help piece together what life may have been like for us, when analyzing it from the future. Sources. The two kinds of sources historians use to help them reconstruct the past. First is a primary source. This is a first-hand account of people who lived through certain events. A lot of what we are going to cover in history class this year are going to be primary source documents. They are things that are written by people living in that time about things that they are experiencing. It's not just written documents or something like that. It can be even like clothes or other artifacts, like I said, buildings or something like that. It could be verbal or it could be non-verbal. But as long as those pieces of evidence were around at the time an event that you're studying took place, it is a primary source. Secondary source gets a little murkier. It's a little tougher to understand. And those are writings by individuals who have read original documents and then incorporated them into their own work. For example, if I was to study the Civil War and everything that I'm researching, I'm trying to explain for somebody else, my work would be secondary because I didn't live through the Civil War. I may be using primary sources and primary points of view from the Civil War to help organize thought today, but because I didn't live through the Civil War, everything that I'm trying to tell my readers, my audience, or you as my students, it would be a secondary source. Now, I could have lived through an event and still be a secondary source. This is where it gets a little weird because I always like to bring up I was alive for 9/11. I can tell you my experience of what happened to me and my thoughts and feelings that day. That's where I would be a primary source. But to report to you what I saw on the news, the president's speeches, his actions, and all of that, that's where I would then become a secondary source, even though I lived through an event. My personal experience and what I did that day would be the primary source telling you what I saw others go through that day. Well, then that's where I would be a secondary source for the same event. So, what to consider? Historians consider two things when analyzing sources. They check validity and perspective. Why is this important? Well, validity is the person who's telling a story about something, can they be trusted? So now they need to check other perspectives to see if it kind of matches up with one another. If you can corroborate, have a lot of similar sounding stories about something that took place, okay, maybe this is important. Maybe this is what I'm reading is valid and truthful. And then historians have to check the honesty and accuracy of sources for the same reasons. So you can't just take one thing and trust that it's the truth because it might not be. We see that a lot today with a lot of misinformation being spread over the internet and through the various social networking sites and so on. That it's always good to not really trust what you're reading unless you can back it up with other reputable sources. Historians' interpretation. Historians analyze what they find and try to make sense out of it. This is not an exact science because people cannot be put into test tubes. So we can't, it can't make a science experiment out of it because, we can't, we don't operate that way. So sometimes only broad outlines are known. We only might know an overall theme of something that may have happened in the past. Well, now it's the job of the historian to take everybody's different perspective, take all of their research, and try to fill in any gaps that they have. That can be tricky too, because a historian who didn't live through an event is trying to piece together based on their own information and their own view of their reality. So it's a little bit hard for historians to get everything 100% correct. You can't. It's impossible. So that's why a lot of history, a lot of information, a lot of research that has been done over the years is changing. You know, um, even in the field of science, research changes when more evidence becomes known. Same thing in history. Just because something was the way it was 40 years ago, now that we have better technology to view evidence and to research a lot better, and maybe it's a little bit easier now to compare different sources, that new evidence may be known. And so it's important to know that interpretations of the past can change because people's points of view change. New evidence brings to light a new way of thinking. And lastly, we have social history here. Social history is the way in which people live, and it's worthy of deeper study. This is especially true for women's history, African American history, and human society overall. We might, a lot of what we're going to study in U.S. history this year deals with um, um, the point of view maybe from a single source, but we also need to now figure out how a policy, for example, may have been for women at the time, or for African Americans at the time, or just human society in general. And you can even break those down and teach a women's history, a African American history class, and so on. So a lot of what we try to cover in this class is going to try to touch upon a lot of things, a lot of different social history. We're going to learn about the African American experience. We are going to learn about Native American experience when Europeans started coming over. We will touch upon women's history and human society or American society through the years and how that has changed. So this PowerPoint was usually done over the course of 2 days. I think we may have done it now in a few moments. You can watch this over and over again if you need to. There are certain terms that we are going to um, have to know for a quiz in the coming days, but you will get more information on that as that time nears. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me and I will try to get back to you as quickly as I can. Or you can drop a comment on Google Classroom when I post this assignment. If you have any questions, I'll just try to get back to you as quickly as I can. Don't be strangers, and we will talk to you later. All right, see you later.